All right, so my name is Chris Sousa, fitness officer from King Campus. Thanks for joining us today. We are in week 3 of our meal prep series. So today is all about safe food handling, safe cooking as well. So if you've been to the previous sessions, we build off each session. So we progress through the whole meal prep journey. So today we'll be discussing ways of handling food safely, prepping safely, cooking safely, and then storing it safely as well. I'm just going to share my screen here. Give me one moment. Okay, so like I said, we're going to go over some tips on cooking, handling, storing your food after you've done the steps before that, which we covered in our last sessions, which are the grocery shopping, planning your meals, planning your schedule of meals for the week, and picking a strategy that works for you. So once we do that and we have our food, it's time to actually cook it. So when we're cooking our food or prepping our food, what we want to do is make sure that we're constantly cleaning our hands. Especially if you're preparing food for other people, it's really important to make sure you're doing everything you can to stop any cross-contamination or food poisoning. So food poisoning is when there's bacteria in our food and there's so much of it that our body can't fight it off and it makes us sick. And there's things you can do to prevent that through handling and storage and cooking. So the first most important step is making sure that we're cleaning our hands frequently, which I'm sure everybody's doing right now. So as you're cooking and prepping and taking things out of the fridge, you want to make sure that you're always washing your hands with soapy water that's also very warm, so that it's warm enough to kill the bacteria, also that you have enough soap on your hands to kill the bacteria. And then also you want to clean all your surfaces that you've been using. Okay, so if you're cutting meat on a cutting board, you want to make sure you're washing the cutting board in between, but also that you're washing the surface around the cutting board as well. And what you don't want to do is use your cutting board and knife to cut meat and then turn around and use it to cut raw vegetables. Okay, so that's what cross-contamination is. It's you're using the same tools to cut raw food that could potentially have bacteria, and then if it does, you're carrying that bacteria into your raw food. So you want to make sure that you're keeping all your surfaces clean as well as the equipment that you're using. Okay. When you're cooking your food, there's certain temperatures that you need to cook different meats at. So each meat has a different cooking temperature because it can have different bacteria in it, and that bacteria basically dies at different heat levels. Okay, so there's different common bacteria in different meat. So the riskiest is always going to be your fish, shellfish, and ground meat. Ground meat and those other meats have higher chances of having bacteria in it. So that's why you want to cook it at a higher amount. Okay. Pork and poultry, same thing. Poultry is like your chicken, that you want to cook that at 165 degrees. Okay, so chicken is what you want to cook the highest, then ground meat, then fish, and then steak. So I know a lot of people eat their steak medium rare, and you can do that if it's at a certain temperature. So this listed here are all the safe cooking temperatures, and you can easily Google this. It's each I guess like industry. So like the pork industry will have a certain temperature that they want you to cook their products at, as do fish, the poultry industry as well, and the beef industry. They'll kind of give you their guidelines, and depending on how you like your meats, you can cook them at different temperatures, but this is the safe minimum. Okay, like I said, what that does is it actually makes sure that any of the bacteria in the meat is effectively killed by the temperature of what you're cooking it at. Okay, what you want to do is definitely get a meat thermometer, because you don't want to just assume that you've cooked your chicken at a set temperature, so the internal temperature is at a certain amount. You actually want to check that. So what a meat thermometer does, it actually has a sharp end, and it pokes through, and you can actually read the temperature in the middle of whatever you're cooking. So if you're cooking something that's like really thick, like a really thick chicken breast or a whole chicken, the surface might be really hot, but the internal temperature still might not be hot yet. Okay, because it does take time for the internal temperature to increase, especially if you're cooking things with bones in it. Okay, so make sure you pick yourself up a decent cooking thermometer. It's a lot different than a regular thermometer because you can actually put it in the oven. There's digital ones too that you can actually, it actually sends like a Bluetooth data to your cell phone. So it really, you can get a $5 one or a $50 one. It really depends on how much cooking you're doing, but they both do the same thing. They're both confirming the temperature of what you're cooking. Okay, it's also a good way of making sure that your meals aren't coming out super dry. So sometimes if we cook things in the oven and we cook them too long, once they're past that temperature, the bacteria is dead. You're no longer at risk, but now you're drying out your food. So that's another reason why you should use a cooking thermometer as well. Okay. We'll go into a little bit about safe storage. So once our food is cooked, it's really the bacteria that we've kind of cooked out of the food, we're safe from that, but once it cools down, it has another risk of having bacteria grow on it. Okay, so there's something called the danger zone, and that's between two different temperatures. So above 4 degrees and below 60 degrees is what we call the danger zone. So within this zone, any bacteria doesn't have to be meat either, it's on all food surfaces, can start to grow within hours, and it actually like multiplies. So you want to make sure that you're either keeping it warm enough or keeping it cold enough between those two temperatures so that the bacteria isn't growing. Okay, so some foods are more susceptible to growing that kind of bacteria, so you want to make sure that you're really staying out of those zones. Again, it's 60 degrees and 4 degrees, so it has to be lower than 4 degrees, so that's why we use a refrigerator, and it has to be higher than 60 degrees, so that's why we keep cooked foods hot. Okay, obviously there's ways of doing this. There's little tricks as well. You always want to keep things cold. Like if you're going on a picnic and stuff like that, you really want to make sure you're using really good thermos or a cooler. If you're going on a hike and you have all your meals packed for the day and you have foods that need to be kept cool, obviously you want to make sure that you're packing all your gear so that you have all the things that need to be kept cold in the middle, so it kind of stays insulated. And the same thing if you're traveling with hot food. If you're going, once we go back to normal and you're traveling, you're having a potluck, or you're going to a friend's house, it's really important to keep that food hot so that you're out of that danger zone. And it only takes like less than an hour for certain bacteria to grow. And again, you don't want that growing on your food, obviously, because it doesn't taste very good, but also it can make people really sick. Okay? So you want to make sure you're out of that zone. When we are cooling things in the refrigerator, it's really important if we're doing all our meal prep, it's really important to cool our foods down really quickly. So in the winter, what I actually do is as soon as I finish cooking, I actually take things outside because it's super cold out, and let it chill and then throw it in the fridge. Because again, when it's in that danger zone, it's more susceptible to growing bacteria. So as soon as you cook your foods, everything's prepped, you want to throw it in the fridge. Okay. Your fridge should be kept at around 4 degrees. You should be able to see it on the inside of your fridge. It'll have a little dial. Sometimes you have an analog one that's a dial. Sometimes you have like a digital one, but just make sure your fridge is set to around 4 degrees. lower if possible, because that'll keep everything where it needs to be. And you want to keep your fridge clean and organized. I know it's kind of a pain, but if you do that on an ongoing basis, like if you do that once a week, it takes like seconds to get in there and reorganize things and shift things around. So make sure you're doing that once a week. Otherwise, you're going to be spending almost half a day cleaning out your fridge. And you want to do that before you do your meal prep for two reasons. Or sorry, before you do your grocery shop, and that's for two reasons. So the first reason is it'll allow you to see what's in your fridge so that you're not doubling up on food that you already have. And the second reason is because you're going to be using less food waste. So a lot of times when we don't check to see what we have in our fridge, things stay in the back and we don't have access to it. So we forget about it and then it spoils. So we really want to make sure that we're not letting our food spoil and throwing away food that could be saving us money. And also it's a lot easier to bring all your groceries in after you do your grocery shop and then put them away if everything's all clean and organized. You don't want to come home, open the fridge, and then realize you have no space in your fridge. So try to do everything beforehand to make it as easy as possible for yourself. Also, when you have your fridge organized and clean, everything's visible. You can see what's in your fridge and everything's accessible. And that's gonna increase your chances of eating healthier, right? If you have healthy food that's right in front of your face and it's accessible and it's easy for you to grab, you're going to be more likely to turn to those foods instead of snack foods. So that's like a tip that I usually use is to kind of make sure you either don't have the snack foods in your house or make it harder for you to get to them. So there's more barriers. And then the opposite is true for healthy foods. You want to make sure that you have everything prepped in containers so it's easy for you to go and grab. Because if it's in the back of your fridge where you're not looking, you don't see it, and you can't get to, then you're most likely not going to eat it. Okay. With foods that you have planned at the beginning of the week, you want those up at the front of your fridge for the same reason. Like if you have food that you are planning to eat on like Monday for lunch and it's at the back of the fridge and you can't find it, you're probably just going to grab something else that's more convenient. So make sure that the foods that you're going to need most frequently and at the beginning of the week are at the front of the fridge. As far as organizing your fridge and what goes where, the bottom of the fridge is usually where it's the coldest. So you want to make sure that you have most of your meats at the bottom, especially your chicken and your chicken and your ground meat that can be at the bottom of the fridge. From there, you would have your other meats, so your pork, beef, fish, stuff like that. And then you can have your eggs, dairy, and then basically everything that doesn't need to be as cold can go to the top. So those are like your fruits, veggies that aren't cut, and then your food that's like the ready to go options. So make sure that your fridge is organized in a way that helps you get to the healthy food and helps you access whatever you need to get access to. For me, I have two crispers, so I have one for my fruits, one for my vegetables. I don't like to cut up my fruits and vegetables too much because they don't last as long when they're cut. So I only cut enough servings for like 2 or 3 days. And then I leave everything else in the crisper. Okay. So we're just gonna go over the types of containers that you are gonna probably want to invest in. Just gonna move that there. If it really depends on what kind of meal prep strategy you're using. You probably all have seen there's like a whole bunch of different types of containers out there. So it can be pretty confusing. So do your research before you purchase them because it's actually a pretty big investment when it comes down to it, especially if you have to buy containers for everything that you're doing. The cheapest one to do would be batch cooking because you're only going to need like 3 to 5 containers. So if batch cooking is an easy strategy for you, and just a refresher on batch cooking, in case you weren't at the last session, batch cooking is basically cooking all of your your components of a meal and then having it in separate containers. So you'd have your meat, your veggies, your sides, and your grains or your carbs. And what you do is you just, every time you go to have a meal, which is, right now, if you're working from home or studying from home, it's pretty easy to do. You just go to each one of your containers, open it up, and you dish out the food. Okay. So that's going to be the cheapest because you're only going to need a couple different large storing containers. They're all going to be the same sizes. The most expensive is probably portioning or portion assembly, or sorry, portion prepping. So the picture on the left there is Tupperware, glass Tupperware that you'd use for your portioning. So that's basically your whole meal in one container divided up. Okay, so if you want to work out how many of those you would need, it would be the amount of meals you're cooking times the number of days that you're prepping for. So if you're prepping 3 meals and you're only prepping 3 days in advance, you're going to need 9 containers. So it adds up pretty quick. So keep that in mind. It's going to cost a bit more money if you're doing the portion strategy. The next is our assembly strategy, and that's where you have all your food kind of pre-assembled, not necessarily pre-cooked. So you could have your grains in one area, you could have your chicken not cooked, but maybe it's sliced up, and then you have your veggies arranged, again, not cooked, but they're washed and chopped. So for that, same thing, you're going to need probably 3 to 5 containers of various sizes, and that's the picture on the right there. You can see you're going to need probably a large container for your fruits, veggies, and grains, and then smaller containers for your sides and your proteins. Okay. So it really depends on what your style is. Everyone has a different strategy that works for them. Find out what works for you, but before you invest, kind of take some time to think about that. As far as the containers themselves, I like to use glass containers. So I'll show you what I have here. These are my containers here. I do a mix of the batch and the portioning. So these are my 2 typical glassware that I use. So I use glass because a couple different reasons. First of all, plastic, when it's heated up, there's a chemical called BPA, and that actually leaches into your food if you have acidic food in the container, or if you're heating up in the microwave, just the process of it heating up can release the BPAs into your food, which if you're consuming will be released into your body. So definitely something you want to take a look at. A lot of stores actually offer BPA-free containers now. So just one of those things that if you read up on it and you don't feel comfortable with that, then that's a really good route to take, is the glass. These are actually from the dollar store, so they're pretty cheap. Pros are that they don't leach BPA into your foods. They're also super easy to clean, and they don't stain. So you can see, I don't know if you guys use plastic before, if you have like a pasta sauce in there, a red pasta sauce, and you go and you try to clean it, you'll have like a stain of red in there. So these are actually super easy to clean, just hot water and soap. You can also throw them in the dishwasher. I've been using these for quite a while. Like I said, they're at the dollar store, so you can actually just take a look and kind of see, imagine what kind of foods you're going to be putting in these containers and the sizes and sort of what strategy you want. And the dollar store is probably a great spot because it's relatively inexpensive there. I would not suggest going to like a Bed Bath and Beyond or Kitchen Stuff Plus. They have a lot of variety, but it's super expensive for some of the glassware that they use. So just keep that in mind. You're going to need different containers. I have some containers that I use for liquids as well. Those are just usually recycled glass jars. So if I'm making like almond milk or anything like that, I'll just use recycled like bottles that I've purchased from the grocery store. If I'm drinking anything that comes in a glass bottle, orange juice or whatever, I really do try to stay away from the plastics. But do some research and see if that's what the route you want to take. I'm okay for myself personally. if I'm putting like dry food or food that I'm not heating up, I'll just get like really cheap plastic containers and use that. And I try to be as green as possible, so I try to keep um, whatever I have and not not get like the throwaway plastic containers. A lot of people do that with their food prep. They'll use these, basically they use them once or twice and they're really flimsy, but they're super cheap and that's why they buy them. But I'm a little more, I guess, green conscious and try to stick with the reusable plastic or the reusable glassware. You can also wrap your food. So if you have like plastic wrap or reusable reusable almost like silicone bags, those are really helpful too, for smaller things and for snacks and stuff like that. I have kids and I know that a lot of times the Tupperware kind of just disappears, so it's best sometimes to use something cheaper like a reusable plastic bag, rubber bag, because sometimes their lunch bags come back and they don't have them in there. But really just try to find the system that works for you. I'm gonna open this up to questions in a second if you guys have any questions. As far as the storage goes again, I'll also just kind of go over the types of foods that I purchase. I always make sure that I lean towards foods that last longer. So if I'm looking at vegetables, I'm always looking at like cabbage, broccoli, carrots, onions, potatoes. Those things, if they're kept dry and they're not cut, they can last a pretty long time. So that's why I'll gravitate more towards those foods. Things like green leafy lettuce, spinach, they don't last very long. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll do a grocery shop once a week, but halfway through the week for items like that aren't going to last that long, I might go in and pick up some of those. So just keep that in mind. Like sometimes you want to choose things that last a bit longer. And those things can be kept in the back of your fridge because you're not frequently trying to get them. So things that I store in the back of the fridge are things that I don't use every day because it's kind of tiresome to move everything around and find it again. And you want to keep those things in the front of the fridge. Okay. So did you guys have any questions? If you did have any questions, you can shout them out or you can read them in the chat, write them in the chat. But if not, that's okay too. I'm just going to stop sharing the screen. Awesome. Okay, so if you don't have any questions, I will let you go. It's about 25 after 4. If you do have any questions that you don't want to ask here, you can always shoot me an email, chris.sousa@senecacollege.ca. And next week will be our final week, so make sure you come back 4 o'clock on Thursday. And I hope you guys all have a great long weekend. I guess you don't have class tomorrow or work tomorrow, so have a great long weekend and take care.